I'm Bennett Singer, and as you mentioned, I'll be moderating this mentorship session with my friend and colleague, Mridu Chandra. I'm really happy to welcome everyone to the Next Generation Angels Awards mentorship session. I think this idea of intergenerational conversations in any forum is incredibly inspiring. Ridu and I actually just finished working on a project that brings together activists of different generations and having folks in their 70s and 80s and 60s and 50s chatting with teenagers and young activists is such a uplifting and enlightening and eye-opening process. And I think there's that same potential tonight with this concept. All of us here have, as you all know, have been have had our work recognized by a panel of judges for its excellence in well-researched and powerful historical documentary filmmaking. So there's that common ground to unite us and bring us together. And I really want to thank Devin Malecki and her colleagues at the Better Angel Society for bringing us together and for their overall vision in empowering and supporting folks who make historical documentaries. It can be a lonely universe, and their support, I know some of you, and I've connected with some of you through other mentorship and fellowship sessions, and it's been such a positive opportunity for us. And certainly, when Cured, the latest documentary that I co-directed, was selected as the runner-up for the prize, Library of Congress, Levine Ken Burns Prize for Film a few years ago. That was such a shot in the arm, both in terms of the financial support, which was huge, but also the recognition. And so it's that has led to this ongoing relationship, and I just think it's such a positive moment and positive development within the world of documentary filmmaking. Um, so the primary focus of this hour-long session will, in fact, be dialogue between the student filmmakers and the professional filmmakers. We'll have ideally four sets of conversations, or perhaps three, lasting in the 10-minute to 12-minute range each, but there's flexibility on that. And at the start of each of those conversations, we'll ask the participants to introduce yourselves, to say a few words about where you are, your award-winning film, and I guess I can kick us off, and then Ridu will introduce herself. But I'm coming to, I'm based today in at this point in Los Angeles, having relatively recently relocated from New York. I've been making historical documentaries for about 30 years, terrifyingly enough. Very first project I worked on, had the privilege of working on, was Eyes on the Prize, which is 14 hours on the history of the civil rights movement. And I will quickly say that I know a lot of schools do incorporate that series in their history curriculum, but for folks who haven't seen it, I just have to say it's it's an iconic series that I think has so much resonance, both in terms of the history, but also the filmmaking craft. So, and I'm happy to say it's all 14 episodes are accessible on Canopy for free with the library card. So I would encourage folks to check that out. The latest project I co-directed, as I mentioned, is Cured, which is certainly very much tied into this theme of turning points. Until 1973, if you were gay or lesbian, doctors automatically classified you as mentally ill and in need of a cure. And this film tells the story of the activists and psychiatrists and allies who challenged that diagnosis and pretty miraculously brought about this huge paradigm shift in 1973. So that film had a national broadcast on PBS, is now streaming on various platforms, including the PBS Documentaries channel on Amazon. And I'll also say quickly, we were just a couple weeks ago in Boston at the National Conference, or National Council for the Social Studies annual conference with 4,000 history teachers. Ken Burns was actually there and gave a really inspirational talk, but it was so heartening to take stock of where we are, I think, in terms of this country's democratization and our role as citizens, and to meet with teachers and think about how they're using social issue and historical documentaries as a fundamental tool to help students navigate their way through our complex political and social landscape. Lots more to talk about on that front, but let me ask Mridu now to introduce herself, and then we will quickly delve into the conversations, which, as I said, is really the heart of the hour.
So I'm Ritu Chandra. I'm a film producer and a researcher based in New York. I moved to New York when I was 25 because I wanted to work in film. And Bennett gave me my first meaningful job on Brother Outsider, the film he mentioned. I've worked with him on 3 feature documentaries, and I've also produced 9 other feature films. 3 of them have been fiction films. All my work has aired on PBS, Netflix, and most recently Disney Plus. So I'm now directing my first feature documentary about our first Asian American congressman in history. He was an Indian farmer in California, and it's a story that's overlooked and largely been left out of our history books. So I'm making this film to expand the narrative of American history, because learning that story really helped me in a way to place myself in American history, and I'm hoping it'll do the same, have a similar impact for others. But I'm excited to be here because I'm a bit of a research nerd, and it's rare to be in a room with so many people who make historical documentaries. So I look forward to speaking with all of you.
And so at this point, we'd love to move into the dialogue portion of the hour. Each of the professional filmmakers was asked to watch and reflect on one of the student films, and thinking we will go in alphabetical order based on the students' names. So let us start with David Gilbert's film, and his mentors are Asaf Galay and Marlene McCurtis. So David, why don't you start us off by telling us a bit about where you are and why you made this film, and then Asaf and Marlene will introduce themselves, and the 3 of you and the rest of us can chime in. We'll have a conversation about your project.
Thank you. My name is David, and I did my project on the Americans with Disabilities Act. I have severe dyslexia. My brother has autism. He also has severe dyslexia. So the ADA played a big part in our lives. So I just wanted to learn more about that and share it.
And where are you?
I am in Maine.
Okay, pretty cold, I suppose.
No, we're right by the coast, so it's
Oh,
like 40 degrees.
okay. Well, that's admirable. That's great. Well, thank you for that quick background. And then Marlene and Asaf, why don't you share a bit about your work, your films, where you are, and then we can delve into your chat with David.
Uh, my name is Asaf. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I Most of my film are themed about arts and literature. My latest project about the brother, they are the animation pioneers in United States. Won the Ken Burns Prize. The Fleischer brother did Popeye, Superman, Betty Boop. They were the rival of Disney. Before that, I did a film about Sol Bello, that was a runner in the Ken Burns Prize, and was aired in American Masters, PBS, and I'm in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Thank you. My name is Marlene. I'm directing my first feature documentary after working for over 25 years in nonfiction television, for A&E and other cable outlets. My film, Wednesdays in Mississippi, was a runner-up for the Ken Burns Prize, and it is an unknown story of Black and white women coming together secretly in Mississippi during the Civil Rights Movement to really make impact on children and women's lives there. I am a Sundance Humanities Fellow and also was a fellow at Firelight Media.
That I think is great to have a sense of each of your project, what you were recognized for within the Library of Congress Levine Ken Burns Prize competition. But at this point, I know, or I think you both have watched and thought about David's film, right? So I'd love to offer, or invite you at this point to share your thoughts and comments and questions and to talk with David at this juncture.
Great. Do you want to go first, Asfat? Do you have?
No, you, I think,
Okay. Well, first of all, I was saying to you, David, was so impressed by your archival research. I mean, you had so much information and really impressed with just all your archival material, the photographs, the newspaper articles. I mean, you are, obviously a history nerd, and which I think we all are, right? So that was so I was really, really impressed. And one of the questions I had for you is, I was wondering what you wanted your audience to feel or learn from watching your film.
Well, I wanted them to find out how big a deal the ADA was because, I talked about the past history of eugenics and all that, and I talked about how 504 was the first time uh, it was viewed as a disability. So I really wanted to show how amazing the ADA was, not because it had such a change, but also, I mean, it was really hard. There was a very low chance of it passing. Uh, the law mandated that most buildings had to be accessible, which was a huge step from before. So I wanted them to get that feel of the huge change that happened.
Okay, great, great. And tell me a little bit about your research. I mean, tell me how you went about doing all of that.
Well, it all started with a Google search, of course, and then you just keep going on down, keep scrolling, and then until you find some primary sources or go to Wikipedia, go to the sources, and then you just read through all those. And then you go down all the rabbit holes from all those until you can't take anymore.
So the other thing, I mean, I don't know if you want kind of feedback, a little feedback on the film.
Definitely.
I thought that one of the things I thought that you could do, I know you use title cards. And I'm not sure, I don't know if you agree with this, I thought that you didn't really need the title cards and really, I think, kind of trusting yourself that you're delivering the information. One of the things I really liked about your film was that disability protest on congressional steps and how you put that together in terms of the stills. And one of the things you may want to think about is sound, like how you can use sound. Like, what if we could hear a little bit of that noise that was going on? It doesn't even necessarily have to be the sound from there, but I think that would bring it alive a little bit more. And anytime you can, you use some footage, and kudos for you for getting that interview with Nancy Taylor. That was like amazing. And but any more footage that interviews like that, I think would could help a little bit with the story. I don't know, where are you with the project right now? Are you thinking you're going to do any more editing, or is it done?
So in NHD, you do a different project every year. So I might go back and do some extra stuff, but right now I'm starting a whole nother one.
Great, great. Well, what's your new project?
I'm doing mine on PFAS, so that's that's a chemical that they used a ton in like the 80s for a ton of things. They even spread it as fertilizer over farms, especially here in Maine. And now we're finding out it causes a lot of cancer and hormonal issues, which so they're having to do a lot of cleaning up. So that's my new one.
You like activism. You like to highlight activism in your work. It sounds like that's kind of your focus. So really excellent job. I'm going to turn it over to you as far. So yeah.
So as Berlin said, I was really impressed with your research. I didn't know about this subject. It was very impressive, and the storytelling. It was really and you did everything by yourself: research, narration, editing. Really, really impressive. Uh, so I will try to take what Marilyn said about the sound. I think that you can right now there is only one track in this your video, and music can make us more feelings, and you can make more use more tracks when and give us more peaks with the track, and the music can really say what is important, what is the big climax of the movie. So try to use sound also in your next project. Sometimes when I edit myself, I choose the track that I like. I say, okay, I will edit by the beats of the music with the soundtrack. I know. I thought that for your movie, I will use the Four Seasons of Vivaldi because already you have the four parts, so something like this. So if you will have time. And another trick, I'm sure that everybody knows it. So you have there's sometimes some archive footage that, of course, you didn't have the uh, budget to buy them or to get a high definition. There is right now Topaz. Everybody here might have heard about it. Topaz AI. You put all your newspaper and you get it in a high resolution and you can read it. So use it always for every photo that you take from the Google, that it's in low resolution. For every newspaper, put it into Paz AI. It's for free and it makes magic. And the quality is 4K. So just
Thank
use it.
you.
Yes.
David, do you have questions for us at all or?
Yeah, I had how do you choose your music? I know you were talking about that, but like how do you choose what you want?
Uh, uh, Sometimes the music is coming from the subject. Like if I do a music about the 20s, jazz, so it's coming from the area. Uh, Sometimes it's coming just from inspiration. In music, it's really important uh, not to use music with voice, just music. So I prefer also classic music that have already themes that you can play with them. But really, there is libraries for music. You just put their code names for thinking that you say, okay, emotion, and it gives you, wow, tons of track for free. So just there is so many sound libraries. I can send you names for it.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
really
you.
picky. I'm really picky about music, which my editors will attest to. Um, and so I agree. I mean, just I think it takes time and listening and taking time and listening to a lot of tracks that and really finding that right one. And so you try it and maybe that one doesn't work, or you try it and then you come back and you're like, well, maybe that, that isn't as strong. I want to put something else in. But I agree, music and also other sounds, environmental sounds, I think can do a lot for just, having still images, crowd sounds, street sounds, particularly in your film, you had some of that, protest, sounds of protest. But yeah, music is tough, but it takes a lot of listening and experimenting.
Yeah, I have one more question. How do you choose the topic of your film? Like, what makes a good topic?
I don't know. This is an easy question. You always take a topic that you are passionate about it. Never take a
Exactly.
topic that you never passionate, that you don't want to tell.
Yeah.
It will be a bad movie. So it's easy, and you are very interested. It looks that you are very curious. You have a lot of topics. You will find many topics in your career, that I'm sure.
Yeah, as you said, you've already started another project. So you're obviously interested in the process, right? So just keep going with what you're interested in. I'm just going to segue to the next filmmaker, if that's okay. But we will have time after all four of you have your individual session to ask questions as a group. So if you had more questions, David, just please hang on to them. So next we have David Miranda, and James Sorrells is the filmmaker finalist who's going to give you feedback. So maybe we could start with, and then also Bennett and I are going to jointly chime in as well. So you get a little extra for your session. But maybe you could start, David, with a little bit about yourself and why you make this historical film. And then James, we can get you to introduce yourself too.
Hi, so yeah, my name is David Miranda. I'm an eighth grade filmmaker from Memphis area. Uh, I got first at NHG last year, and I mean, I really just enjoy making films. I mean, for like a while, I've loved like like editing, and especially like they were saying when I get a topic I'm passionate about or really enjoy like researching. Like my last year, so I did Miranda v. Arizona and how that was a turning point. And I don't know, I really love learning about law. So of like landmark Supreme Court case. I just love researching and like making films about that.
James, do you want to introduce
Yeah,
yourself? And
yeah, absolutely. Sure. Well, it's a pleasure meeting you, David. My name's James. I'm a documentary filmmaker based in Chicago. And I don't know if it was fate or a wonderful choice on the program's part, but your documentary subject is really close to mine. So I've been making this documentary for a long time, for about 11 years. We're finally in post-production and very grateful and excited to be a Ken Burns finalist this year. And it's on it's a grim story, but an important one and an ongoing scandal in Chicago where a police commander and some elite detectives under his command for in the 70s and 80s and early 90s tortured dozens of African American detainees to get signed confessions. And there were a lot of people who knew about it. Like prosecutors, the mayor, the state's attorney, um, the media in some cases. But it was a real conspiracy before kind of crusading journalists, these torture survivors themselves, and some activists demanded justice for it. So it's on kind of the root cause of how that happened, how torture was allowed to kind of thrive in this police station for a number of years, and then this epic fight for justice to expose it. And something that really attracted me to this subject. I don't know if maybe attracted is the wrong word, but that really fascinated me at the same time as horrified me is that a number of the men who were tortured, a number of them were found out to be to have made false confessions after being brutally tortured, and later were exonerated. There are a number of men, though, who had committed heinous crimes themselves and signed confessions accurately, stating the crimes that they committed. And then there are many kind of in between now where we don't know the guilt or innocence. But something that I really was moved by your film, and I think is so cool, is that the point of my film, and I think that the point of yours too, is that regardless of a crime that someone's accused of committing, is there's really these essential rights in our country, and Miranda is definitely one of them. And I was really enjoyed watching your film a few times to see how you clearly laid out the importance of the law. You gave the context leading up to it of these other laws as well, Gideon versus Wainwright, and then linked it to the Bill of Rights as well. But the clips, I was especially impressed too about these clips you found of Hugo Black talking and of the read technique. I think you did an excellent job of putting in some, so it didn't kind of feel like boring history sometimes as it can to a number of people, but I really felt that you made it alive through those clips that you picked. And so, a first question to you would kind of be is, how did you decide what clips to pick? Because I think you got some really strong ones that conveyed the point you were trying to make, the point of view of, law enforcement or a Supreme Court justice, like really quick. We got it right away, who's talking and the importance of what they're saying. So I'm curious to learn how you found and decided on those clips.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of clips in my documentary, and some of them came like as David was saying, it would come from like one Google search, and I would go down, find the sources, and things like that. That's where I'd find some of the videos. And a couple of them came from an actual like CD that I bought in the Miranda, or like the Phoenix Police Museum, that had an exhibit on the Miranda rights. So I was in Phoenix, and I like went to the museum because that was my topic, and I bought the CD. That's where I got one of the clips. So yeah. How I like choose to go where, like you were saying, I can like, give 2000 or 10 minutes of like just like straight boring history. Like I can just make it boring. But some of those clips, I felt make you like, especially like some of the read ones, it really makes you like feel, it gets you like emotionally attached to the documentary. So I chose that, like a lot of times like these like primary sources can speak like more than just my words can. So I picked a lot of those videos just based on how like impactful they are and how much like, yeah, how important they were to like conveying my point, and like,
Yeah. Well, congratulations. I think you made wonderful picks. It was exciting too to, just even starting your video with having the montage of these well known to me. I was born in 1980, so I was almost surprised at these clips you chose of RoboCop, and so forth. I mean, I know that really well. I don't know how many other people do, but I was really it kicked off on an exciting note, and so I commend you on the clips. I'm thinking of a couple other questions too that I kind of had for you is as far as having a lot of history that I was kind of mentioning, starting in the Bill of Rights and then these cases leading up to Miranda. How did you decide, this is the right amount of history to put in, or this is too much now. I don't need to go into this much like that. How did you come to those decisions?
I actually think that's a really good question. I think I can name like, 5 or 6 cases that are like, honestly, I'd say like crucial to Miranda that led up to it. And at one point, one of my first iterations of the documentary, I had like, like 4 of those cases in there, like a brief like summary of each. But uh, a lot of them weren't like as important to Miranda. Like they were important, but I had to weigh like, is it going to be possible to tell the history without like boring the, like you were saying, like if I have 4 or like 5 just straight case laws, summaries, it's not like, it's not going to help me. It is important to understand the context and background of what led up to Miranda. So I really just have to weigh how important, like I picked Escobedo and Gideon were the most important that led up to Miranda. So I just really picked what would convey my point the best with limited number of time. Amount of time.
That's cool. I also want to say too about I really like the job that you did telling us about specifically the Miranda case. You kind of introduce it a little bit, and then we learn more about the specifics of his case and what happened to him afterwards. The one thing I would maybe consider, I think it would be this would be difficult, but one thing you might consider is, that story that you told to Miranda, where we have this personal connection with the person who's going through this, this important legal situation that you're dealing with. If you were able to, excuse me, start on a personal story, like let's say, if you started on somebody who, that knowing that I have a right to an attorney saved them, some sort of personal story to draw in. Right now, it's really effective starting with those action movie scenes with the Miranda rights, but it's if possible too, if you explore this later on in a longer format, maybe consider somebody finding a story who somebody knew about that law you're writing about and exercised it, and it kind of saved them, because those personal stories are great to take us into the history. But really wonderful job, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just
Speaking,
want to piggyback on that compliment that I thought it was really good storytelling structure because you brought in so many elements all anchored on Miranda's story itself himself. And just starting with that and then going back in history and then going forward with the movie clips, it's a lot to handle, but you did it in such a compelling way. So that's the magic of filmmaking that you've accessed, and congrats on that. I was like intrigued the whole way, and the fact that I remember all of the details in the film and the different cases says a lot because court cases are really difficult to make a film about and to do
Yeah.
so in an interesting way. So, and I knew when I was watching it that I was going to understand that I knew the value of paying attention. So I did want to ask just a little bit about, or just to suggest that you kind of trust your own filmmaking abilities and try to use a little less text, because there were some parts where I felt like you lost your confidence in yourself, which is like just to show text where you had where you were speaking the narration. And that's fine if it has a function, but I kind of felt like there was an opportunity to maybe further edit, like you could even think of using some of those movie clips as your footage to drive the story forward.
It's a great
So when
idea.
you're talking, you could have, I mean, it's nice to see and hear the audio of the movie clips because those are the Miranda rights that we have to be read. But beyond that, you could use some of that footage to illustrate the points that some of these cases are making. So I think that's like it's going to like the next level, I think, if you wanted to look at this film again. But overall, just great storytelling.
No, and I
Yeah.
really like that comment. Sorry, but I was just gonna say a lot of the text. I think like 90% of the time I had text, for like longer than 10 seconds. Was I really tried hard to like
Uh-huh.
find a good photo or like a video that would go with that. And I really didn't think about putting the video over that. So that is a good comment because I did it a little bit, but I definitely think that's a good feedback. Thank you for that. But I
Yeah,
will say
it's
I
almost a
definitely.
little wild, but it works because you had already introduced the movie clips. And then, these are the situations that are in the movies, but it alludes to the stories in those movies, which
Yeah.
is the inequality, right? And the police, forcing people into confession. And so we can see that. But great job. I was intrigued to ask you, did you always plan to use the movie clips? Because that's the wild element in a way. Or is that something that evolved as was there a process that you went through, or did you already know from the beginning you were going to include all of these elements?
I think the one of the most important parts of a documentary, at least in my opinion, is the intro, the hook, like you guys were saying. At first, my first like said time I was trying to writing the introduction, it was uh Miranda walked into a Phoenix police station for he got arrested. Little did he know, 100 or 60 years down the line, this would be an paramount of importance case. It really just that was kind of, I want to say, overdone. It's that's kind of like I was trying to go with like a not like a cliche or like a overdone type intro. And a documentary I was watching, I think it was on Miranda, had a pretty similar intro. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was similar. And I think that's kind of where I got my inspiration. So it definitely did start with some text that was a little overdone, and then it um went into that. And yeah, I was just trying to make the it compelling and make people really want to be interested from the jump.
And also that
Yeah,
reminds me at the end that you end with a hook too, which is that
absolutely. The ending's
with the
great.
guy who killed him in a bar fight, which is almost obscure, right? But he was read his Miranda rights. So good job with that.
Thank you.
Um, Bennett, do you have anything to add, or we're
Well,
actually out of
I
time?
quickly, yeah, I know we want to
Oh,
move
yeah.
on, but the thing that I kept wondering about, like, it's pretty uncanny that your name is David Miranda. And is there a relationship between you and Ernesto Miranda? And even, well, and if so, did you consider revealing that, addressing it? Like, t was there any, what, if any, relationship do you have to the historical Miranda?
So I like to say, okay, so he is not, I'm gonna say, he's not related to me. I don't want to be related to him. He committed horrendous crimes. But I would like to say it'd be cool to say, oh, I picked this because of my last name. And sure, that's what caught my eye, but I really didn't pick it. Like I was saying, I picked it because of how impactful it was and less to do with my name. So it's not the reason I picked the topic, and he is not related to me, luckily. It's just
Interesting. Okay. Well, it does raise this whole other topic about like to what extent is the filmmaker involved in our film? And there's a whole range of answers to that and a whole range of styles. But one potential opening could have been you with your own voice saying, my name is David Miranda. I'm not related to this historical figure, but we do have the same name and he changed history. Or there could be a way that you connect that or at least address the question because I did find myself wondering, is there anything in the credits or is there going to be anything telling us like or addressing this logical question? Because it's a pretty rare name and a pretty interesting like it just kept me wondering. So there might be a way to capitalize on that. Because I totally agree with what you've all been saying about like the opening is so important and like drawing people in and avoiding text or not overwhelming us with text. So it's just something to think about. But that element of your own personal connection, even if it's a coincidence, could be something to consider, if in stories like this.
Yeah, David, I'll say too, if you ever meet another filmmaker named Gideon, you got to know it's fate, and you guys have to make a movie together in this way. You've got to do it.
I agree. Yes. That would be pretty amazing.
Thank you, guys. Okay, let's move on to the third session with Maeve Callahan Schreiber and the
I think
filmmaker.
she's not here, however, Madhu.
Oh, I'm
So,
sorry.
so I think for now, at least, let's go to the fourth. And then
Okay,
if she doesn't materialize, there's plenty of other questions, or maybe she'll tune in late.
got it. Okay, well, hi, Maeve, wherever you are. And let's move on to Elena Weintz. I hope I said that right. And the filmmakers are Nora Shapiro and Deanna Dilworth. Elena, do you want to introduce yourself? Oh,
Oh, I think we lost her.
we
Oh, we
lost.
did. We just lost Elena.
Okay, hopefully she'll come back. Sometimes that leave button is right in the way.
Mm.
And I see an update from Devin saying Maeve was not able to attend. So that's at least clarity on Maeve. And I think Elena will be returning. She
Okay.
might have unintentionally left. But why don't we there's so much, I think, so much common ground here that we can all think about together. Like that issue of music
Mhm.
and narration. Like maybe we should talk about narration. And I've made films with narration, I've made films without narration. It opens up a lot of, and speaking of, a master of films with narration, there's Ken Burns, whose films are really, I think, driven by narration in some ways and shaped by that tool. On the other hand, it might be interesting for some of the professional filmmakers to talk about why or to what extent you've avoided narration or chosen to tell a story without narration or what you see as the pros and cons, because it seems like all of the student filmmakers did include narration, and I think as a conceptual element to consider, like what are the pros and cons or the benefits and drawbacks that we all see in incorporating or deciding not to incorporate narration. So I'd love to, since we have a bit of time at this point, to open things up. Maybe that's a topic we could jump into.
I'll bite both on those questions, but before I do that, I wanted to, so I don't forget, I wanted to mention a film for David Gilbert that I wanted to recommend. I'm sorry I didn't have the pleasure of watching either David's films, and I think that would be a good um, just addition in the future to provide the links to the other films in case people have time to watch them. But for David Gilbert, there's a film that if you haven't seen it, I highly, highly recommend you see, given the passion that you described for your subject. And it's called Crip Camp. And it is a film by a master filmmaker and wonderful human being named Jim Lebrecht. And it was actually the first film that the Obama's production company, Higher Ground, got behind and put out. And it is remarkable, and it has a lot about the history of the ADA. And it is a personal film from his own experience and its remarkable archival materials. So I cannot recommend it enough if you haven't seen it, and to anybody, to all the students and any lover of documentary. It's a remarkable film. I think it was listed in the top 100 films of all time from the New York Times within the last year. It's a remarkable film. So, but for you in particular, I wanted to mention that.
All right, I'll make a point of watching it.
Great.
And I'm putting the link to the site
Great.
that has
Thank you,
all
Bennett.
all the winning student films. Yeah,
Great.
it was pretty riveting to watch them and to see them together. So I think that's such a good point, Nora. And I
Yeah, I,
totally,
I'm fascinated. I want to watch them all. So, and
yes.
and David Miranda, I have a quick note for you too, which is that in my previous incarnation, we'll probably do intros soon, but I was a public defender before I became a filmmaker, and so you're after my own heart here, and the intersection between the legal stories and legal history and documentary is just keep going because it's really rich and really important. Um, Now to Bennett, quickly to answer your or address anyway, I'm actually gonna vamp and delay responding to the script, my notes about script, because I actually have some notes about that specifically for Elena. So I think it might be more helpful in that context. And then the thing that I would just throw in from my experience as a filmmaker is I've always tended to not use narration. And in fact, I'm going to try the experiment of doing narration in an upcoming
Mm.
process, which is a little backwards for a lot of people, particularly with historic films. But I think it's a great experiment for the students to try both ways. And since you all did chose to do, it sounds like narration, I would urge you to experiment with that, just in terms of the form, because I mean, one thing that not having a script forces is for you to find other ways to tell your story. And in some ways, one can argue that it might push you further to think about the visual layers and the sound, the audio, the sound design, all of those things. And the hardest thing in the world, in my opinion, in documentary is a strictly verite film with no text and no, expository information, much less script. So I don't say that lightly, but I think it would be a great exercise. Those were just my quick comments. Kind of quick, not so quick.
No, thank you. I think that's really helpful. And I see Elena is back. So we can shift to that conversation. And then also, I guess after that, we'd love to hear from John and Julia, to hear about your projects and any thoughts you have, or we can we can open things up at the end after this next segment, focusing on Elena's film. And Nora, as you said, you're one of the mentors, and Diana Dilworth is the second for Elena's project. So, Elena, why don't you start by giving us a quick intro about where you are, what drew you to your project, and then we'll segue into the conversation.
Yeah, sorry, I was having some like Wi-Fi internet issues.
Glad you're
My
back.
name is Elena, and I'm also in the Memphis area. And my film is about the Congo crisis and like the independence of the Congo and the CIA involvement in that. Um, and what really drew me to it was actually a book I was reading in English class called The Poisonwood Bible, which is set in the Congo crisis 1960s. Um, so I actually switched my topic from like the jungle and food safety laws and like that sort of investigative journalism to the Congo crisis. Um, and yeah, I think that's it.
Diana, do you want to jump in since I've already spoke a little bit,
Sure.
and then I'll
Hi,
jump in after?
that sounds great. I'm Diana. I am a filmmaker and journalist, and I recently made a film that was part of Better Angels about a woman named Dory Previn with Julia Greenberg, who's also on the call. I just wanted to say thank you for your film because I really enjoyed it. It was very important story. It's a story I knew about, but it drew me in right away. I actually talking about how to start and end films and things. I really liked how you started on the speech that Lumbamba was giving at the UN. It sort of drew me into the subject and just kind of moved along quickly. I liked the storytelling in the sense that it was both informative and giving information that was interesting, historical, but also sort of emotional, so that I was drawn into like to caring about the injustices that were happening when the US and the CIA was involved in the Congo and yeah. And also I happen to have recently seen another film on this similar topic that addressed it sort of through music. So I was thinking about that film as well, and it just was a pleasure to watch. So thank you for making it. I guess my first question for you was really like where you found your footage and how you decided to use the archival footage that you used.
Yeah, so some of my footage, I believe, was from it was like a while ago and I like can't remember these things to save my life. But I found this like sort of this archive online and it um had a lot of footage of like Lumumba and like people like in that area. And that's where I found the footage of Lumumba when he was captured and just a lot of other of my videos. And then also just like I think I got my intro from a YouTube channel.
Mm.
I don't remember which one, but
I'm curious if you wrote the script first or if you found the footage first and kind of how you addressed your storytelling process.
yeah, script writing was definitely one of the biggest like sections of like how I planned out my time. But also like during my research, if I would like find an article or a newspaper or like some sort of documentary that had good like visual footage, I would sort of like put like a bookmark in it in my like citations list and be like, okay, this has a really good picture. I want to save this for later. But script writing was definitely what I did first, and recording was what I did first, and then I went in and added all the visuals in.
That's great to hear because when you were saying that some of the sources you weren't sure, I think that's one of the things when we make films that are heavily archival. And our recent film was very archival, and there were some times where we would find footage and then we forgot where we found it. And you really have to track everything so that you can make sure when you go back and get it. But maybe you just don't remember off the top of your head. So um, I will pass it over now to Nora.
Thank you. Um, So, just quickly by way of introduction, I waited, Elaine, until you were back on to do this part. Um, Obviously, I'm Nora Shapiro. My film, Magic and Monsters, that I'm directing, producing, was the winner this year of the runner-up prize, for which I am so not only honored, but deeply and profoundly grateful. It's just been the shot in the arm in every possible way, financially, and everything that Bennett referred to is beyond words, and particularly in this in the current um, somewhat dark times that we're in the documentary realm. Um, I already mentioned a little bit about my previous incarnation, let's call it, as a public defender. I've actually been making films longer. I tend to, if I look back, I think that maybe a common thread, when it's hard to see one otherwise, relates to my previous work, which is I tend to be attracted to things that are complicated, have at least some darkness, but also light and hope, and definitely include a piece of um, truth to power speaking. And I tend not to shy away from things that are a little bit controversial. My current, the film Magic and Monsters, which I actually just have to share with you all, had my first day of color correction today. Raced back to be here in time, but which would not have been possible again without the better. We wouldn't be at this point in the process without the support. Um, it is about not only a renowned children's theater, but perhaps the most renowned children's theater in the world, that just so happens to be here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and was founded in the late 60s and in a basement of a building. And it was just sort of, let's just do this. And it turned into this remarkable thing that ended up in the cover of the Smithsonian. And D.A. Pennebaker focused his camera on because it was so revolutionary and remarkable. I grew up on it. It informed my artistic sensibilities. I raised my kids going to it. One of my kids was a child actor there, happily long after the trouble that the film focuses on. But it also, like many arenas where stories have been told, where children are involved, there was a deep and extensive history that actually has been covered up about of child abuse, child sexual abuse. Um, and there's a lot of forces that would like that story still to never come out. So that's what my film was about. And the one additional thing, just in case it's of interest for the students, I think maybe this might be different than any of the other films. It is heavily, as was required, as a requirement for the Burns Prize, an archival heavy film looking at the past and the history, but it also followed litigation in the present. That was an unearthing of that past, and so it connected it. So it has both that backward looking and forward facing component. Um, Elena, I just have to say I was blown away by the sophistication of your piece. It was really, really good. Better than a lot of adult filmmakers that I've seen, to be honest. So seriously, I was incredibly impressed, and it was very sophisticated. And some of my notes or constructive feedback, just know that I'm giving them to you because it's so good. And I think a couple things. So, and then Diana asked a bunch of my questions, so I'll try to come up with some other ones. But um, first note is that I think this is about Bennett's earlier question about narration. Back to that or script. Um, your script was so dense and so had so much in it. Um, the you know the I felt that what was missing was the opportunity to breathe, to let some of it register. And I would ask what I would suggest is that you go back and if you were going to go back and edit this, or if not, if you're done and you're moving on to your next thing, then take this note forward. But to allow more space, to leave room for your audience to absorb some of these really important concepts and facts and dates and um, the really compelling way you put things together. Also, to allow them to absorb the visual images. Um, I thought you did a beautiful job of incorporating music. Um, I think you just did a lovely, beautiful job with that. And also, I was incredibly impressed not only with the sophistication of the editing, but also the depth and breadth of the archival materials that you found and the way you used them. It was just a very gracefully edited and built and a really beautiful build. The big things that I took away and was really struck by was, this was a very bold and direct critique by you about American capitalism and American foreign policy and its role in the world. And I just want to applaud that. And it's a particularly important time for young voices to be doing that. So right on and keep at it. That was great. Um, but back to I feel like in some ways some of the richness of your script got lost because you were sort of rushing to squeeze it in. And so when all else fails, uh, um, it's hard to drown our darlings, but I would have if you were limited to 10 minutes, then I would recommend cutting a chunk. And that's really hard to do. But always it gets better when you do that. So that was the other thing. Because I was alternatingly caught up in the content, but then we'd be on to the next thing. And so there was just a little bit of that. But really, really great. Um, the other thing that I would throw out there for you as a challenge is, and for anybody, but I would challenge you to try maybe some layering because you clearly had such great command of the music and of your story structure and of the variety of and breadth and depth of materials that you use, but another layer that could bring more life would be layering some of those things. Or if you have, for example, something that's text-based and playing with the opacity and um, just more depth and more things to experiment and play with that you get to do in this visual medium. Um, just trying to think about questions that didn't already get.
And actually, maybe I should jump in because the time has
Okay.
flown by and we're down to the wire. But
Oh, okay. All right. I'll be quiet.
I
I'll
think
stop.
well, I
It was
think
great.
those notes are so helpful for all of us, young and old. Everything you're saying is like, how do you know when something is done? How do you know when it's too concentrated? How do you know when it's, giving people a breath? So I think everything you said is really valuable for everyone here. But I guess before we wrap up, I would love to hear from John as well as Julia, who have been very patiently and silently with us. But since your student wasn't able to join us, I'd love to hear just a bit from each of you about sort of what drew you to the world of historical filmmaking and maybe something about your prize-winning film or whatever you want to share that you think would be pertinent to the next generation of students.
All right, well, I'll jump in real quick. My
Thank
film
you.
was called Behind the Lines. It began as a play that we worked on for a number of years, and I was inspired to write it was a guy who had traveled around the world. His name's Andrew Carroll. He traveled around the world collecting letters written during time of war and had written several New York Times best-selling books. I thought this was fascinating. I read about him in National Geographic. So in 2008, I wrote him an email and he hit me back and we started a collaboration, began a play, which we did kind of around the country for years, Kennedy Center and a bunch of theaters across the country. And it just seemed we wanted to reach a wider audience, so a documentary felt like the right form for it. And so we began fundraising, and we hit that in about 2020, and we just finished it only a couple of months ago. And so we were one of the nominees with the Ken Burns Award, and very grateful for that. Um, that's in short. Julia.
Hi, everyone. I co-directed a documentary about a singer and artist named Dory Previn, who should be much more well known and put on the pantheon of great cultural contributors to American history. And because of misogyny, because of stigma against mental illness, because of short-sightedness of the people who guard the cultural vaults, she has been ignored. So had the great pleasure of being able to tell her story with Diana. And just to the student filmmakers, I didn't get to watch all of your films. I mean, one thing I would share is that I'm 56 years old and I just made my first film. So it's really exciting to see all of you starting so young and to imagine where it might take you, and it might take you somewhere completely else. And also to see that you're pursuing such important political topics that are so relevant to our time. And I would say that the Elena, the film that Diana was talking about, is Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which has been on the film festival circuit with us this year. So it's been, and if you probably can't see it yet, but as soon as you get a chance, I would highly recommend it. Thanks.
Okay, well, here we are at time, pretty good timing. If anybody has any final thoughts, maybe let us know now, or just want to say thank you for coming here. You know, just like Bennett said in the beginning, it's so great to see this intergenerational conversation. And I know I was inspired by your films. I learned from them, and just reminded me how excited I am about historical documentaries. So it goes both ways. It's not just that you're learning from us, we're learning from you, and we're reminded of our own, I was going to say tricks, but skills and tricks by watching your work. So thank you, and keep going. And, you know, in terms of access, and I'm certainly available through Devin if you have questions, or as you start your career path, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. But thank you, and I think I'll hand it over to the Better Angels Society to wrap up.
Well, thank you all so, so much. We're just so grateful to everyone for being here. I mean, this is truly such a special part of the work we do at the Better Angel Society, is connecting filmmakers, both emerging filmmakers and professional filmmakers, and everyone who falls along that spectrum as well. So I am continuously learning from each of you, and we hope to just continue building this community for many years to come. So thank you everyone for being here tonight.
And I guess with that, we will wrap up. But thanks a million to all of you for being so open and giving and sharing. I certainly learned a lot from everyone here, young and old. And I feel like, as we've been saying, this kind of community coming together is such a healthy and rare event. So thanks again to the folks at Better Angel Society for coordinating. And um, as Mridu said, I'm totally happy to, if people do have follow-up questions, you can reach out to me as well through bennettsinger.com, or we can share contact info. But any kind of follow-up is definitely welcome. And with that, happy holidays to everyone, and here's to a healthy and sane 2025. Uh,
Thank
thanks
you.
again.
Thank
Thank
y'all.
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.